Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. Today on A Neighbor's Choice, I'm joined by someone that we've had on the radio program in the past, Dennis Marburger. How you doing?
I'm doing well, David. How are you?
It's doing good. So, we wanted to get an update from you. You've always been very helpful in informing us as to what's happening in Armenia, what is going on with that part of the world, something we don't hear talked about at all. I don't think anybody in the nightly news reports on it, and it's hard to get any facts out of them anyway. So tell us, there's a blockade going on. Tell us what we need to be up to speed on with this.
Thank you, David. Yes, well, you're right on both counts. This situation deserves a lot of coverage, and it's getting virtually none. And I thank you for once again bringing this up. So the blockade that's taking place is a humanitarian blockade imposed by the state of Azerbaijan on the surviving unoccupied remnant of the Republic of Artsakh, which is an area that some people might remember being called in the past Nagorno-Karabakh, but the real name, the name from antiquity and the name that accurately applies to this area is Artsakh. It is to the east of the Republic of Armenia, this area. Most of it is now under occupation by the armed forces of Azerbaijan following the 44-day terror war of aggression that the dictator of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, launched in 2020. This surviving unoccupied remnant right now has about 120,000 inhabitants living there. Approximately 30,000 are children, roughly 20,000 elderly, and the whole area has been surrounded and cut off. There is a corridor going through an area, Berdzor, which the Azerbaijanis call Lachin, and this Berdzor or Lachin corridor between the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh is the lifeline for supplies, food and medicine and that sort of thing, and people would travel back and forth. And in December of last year, Azerbaijan cut that lifeline. That's in violation of the tripartite agreement between Armenia, Russia, and Azerbaijan, which is supposed to be a ceasefire or end to hostilities of the 2020 war, though the hostilities never really ended. Azerbaijan continues its aggression in many forms, off in a little bit lower key, but they're still doing that. So they blockaded the area. There was still some humanitarian aspect of travel going back and forth, a little bit of that. And then several weeks ago, they completely cut everything off and said nothing can get through other than the occasional Red Cross travel from people from Artsakh to go to Yerevan if they needed some serious medical help from medical facilities there. Even that was cut off for a time. In fact, Azerbaijan even they've kidnapped a couple of elderly Armenian civilians one of whom was under the protection of the International Committee of the Red Cross. This is, of course, in violation of all sorts of things. They kidnapped this man and made false accusations against him. And they're holding him along with numerous other Armenian prisoners illegally. And we know the others, apparently reports have come out that they've been mistreated. We don't know this man's condition, but he has some serious health issues. And what they did was they issued some false charges against him. They thought it was somebody else who had apparently the same name or very similar name, but this other person had already died and probably wasn't guilty of what they were saying anyway. But there were no Interpol warrants or no justification for them to do this. They've done that. In the meantime, they have damaged the power infrastructure in Artsakh. They have caused a cessation of any supplies of medicines, household necessities, food. The water supply there is very low now. As you know, water is a big item in many conflicts. And what they have there, because of what the Azerbaijanis did to the power supply, they have to use hydroelectric. And so the water supply from the reservoir, the big reservoir they have over there, is very low, and they don't have pumping stations with enough power to move them. So every type of deprivation you can think of has been imposed on these people who are defending their natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, who don't consent to rule imposed by Baku. But this group, which is a surviving remnant, which has not been killed or driven off by Ilham Aliyev, the dictator of Azerbaijan, is in many ways acting in a Gandhi-like fashion, not violently, but enduring great hardship. And so there have been people trying to raise the alarm about this. And one thing that happened here locally, David, is we had I'm involved with the Michigan Republican Party in the 11th Congressional District. And the good people of our executive committee in our congressional district did pass a resolution calling for enforcement of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act. And that Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, which is actually still in place, so it doesn't need to be reinstated, as our resolution said, but it does need to be enforced. And that says no more U.S. taxpayer subsidy to Azerbaijan. Shockingly, American taxpayers are helping to pay for this oppression, to pay for these barbaric actions of the Azerbaijani government. There was a waiver that was added, and my understanding it was added by or advocated initially by Sam Brownback, who was a governor and a senator from Kansas, and then an ambassador. But Ambassador Brownback has seen what's going on, and he says, you know what, this is a mistake. 907 Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act must be enforced. And so there'd be no more U.S. subsidy for Aliyev. And also our resolution called for an end to all U.S. military collaboration with Azerbaijan and for the military personnel of both countries to return to their home countries. So sadly, and again, shockingly, the U.S. military has been involved with the Azerbaijani military in various, training and other things, and including the Oklahoma National Guard, which I think some folks in Oklahoma would be unhappy about if they knew. But Governor Stitt has apparently a close relationship with Aliyev. And in addition to that, Azerbaijan has some sort of a junior partner or special observer status with NATO. NATO works with them. So here you see all the efforts of this globe-girdling empire that are taking place. So our resolution called for ending all of that. It called for the release. We call for the release of the prisoners. We call for the lifting of the blockade, because no one should be treated like this. And this is an unbelievable situation that these people are being pushed like this. There's a big increase in the amount of heart attacks, and myocarditis is going up among the young people. Pregnant women are having miscarriages at much higher rates. So and then the people there are suffering, including the disabled. There are many people that they just can't get anything that you would need in daily living. So if people think back to what happened when we had the lockdowns over, the COVID situation earlier, it's like that, only a lot worse, including the fact that Azerbaijanis are shooting at people. Azerbaijani armed forces shoot at people in the fields raising crops. So you say, well, can they raise their own food? They have a little bit of that, but you're at risk of being shot by the Azerbaijanis. And the Azerbaijanis are also shooting at people in Armenia proper, where they've occupied some Armenian territory, even where there was a metal processing plant that was being built, and they were shooting at them, including wounding a couple of men of Indian nationality at a joint American-Armenian joint venture. So it's unbelievable what they're up to. And this blockade situation is a massive humanitarian crisis. Needs to be addressed immediately.
So what started this recent conflict here between the Artsakh and Azerbaijan?
Well, that's a great question, David. And the root cause of this is Aliyev's hatred for the Armenian people, the fact that his feelings were hurt over the fact that the Armenians were able to successfully defend themselves from Azerbaijani oppression and aggression in what they call the first Artsakh War, or the first Karabakh War, depending on who's describing it. And he feeds his people a 24/7 stream of hateful Armenian-phobic lies and propaganda. He's a very awful dictator. The human rights situation in Azerbaijan is terrible. They're very corrupt. The ruling family and their collaborators, their sycophants, are quite wealthy, but they're a very small group. The people there suffer horribly. The economy, the ecology, the press freedom, all those things are very low levels. It's like North Korea, with the aspects of the Ottoman Turkish Empire and the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and ISIS all thrown in together with that. And so the root cause is Aliyev wants power. Rothbard said, right, the state is a gang of thieves writ large. And this guy is one of the worst examples of that. When you talk about, I know you have, about people looking at the Messianic State, he works to get the state, the people there to worship the state of Azerbaijan, which is really him and his family. And so because they need an external enemy.
Religious motivation for Islamic versus Christian, or not? This is not what's driving this.
There could be some of that. Now, Azerbaijan in some forms looks very westernized. But they do, when the Azerbaijanis do get control over these Armenian areas and they find the churches, they desecrate the churches. They destroy the grave sites. And I do think there was some of that. I think there is some of that going on. There are Muslim people who protest that and don't like that. And there are even people in Azerbaijan. There are dissidents and groups that saying, hey, we should stop doing this. And this is wrong. But he wants conquest, and he wants to get his people focused on an outside group that he can use as a scapegoat. And so the religious thing is part of it. The historical falsifications regarding what's happened over there is a big part of it. And so his propaganda campaign is aimed to get people not blaming him for all their troubles over there, but to blame the Armenians. And so this is a classic trope that's been repeated, of course, many times. And the religious part is part of it. They will, in an effort to show how to bamboozle people to make themselves look tolerant, their government will say, "Oh, look, here's a church that we didn't destroy. It's might be here in Baku or something. There might be one or two of them." But if you say, "Well, if it's an Armenian church and most of them were destroyed, but there's no people there to worship, they either killed or exiled or forced out all the people." And then there's a German church, I think, that was there. And at one time they said, "Oh, look, see, we have this German church. See, we're very tolerant." And somebody said, "Well, the photograph you're showing doesn't go quite to the top. The steeple there had a cross, but you took the cross off of that." And so there is, there is a religious aspect. I think the biggest religious aspect, like with all oligarchs and kleptocratic dictators, is he wants to be worshipped, and he thinks that he can do whatever the heck he wants. And working in conjunction with Erdogan in Turkey and with suppliers of munitions that they get from a lot of countries. Even Russia, which might surprise some people, but they have a relationship there. Israel is a big weapon supplier to them. They're a big supplier of oil to Israel, and then they're working with NATO and the U.S. This guy thinks he's invincible. He's got it all figured out.
And so, what's Erdogan's role and Turkey's role in this recently?
Well, a couple of things, David. During the 44-day terror war of aggression in 2020. Turkish military leaders and advisors were over there working with the Azerbaijanis. They had, I think, Turkish F-16 planes were there in Azerbaijan at their air bases. The Azerbaijanis used the Turkish Bayraktar drones, which have also been used in the conflict in Ukraine. The NATO versus Russia war in Ukraine. They've shown up there. Turkey also does what they can to support. They support Azerbaijan wherever they can. In fact, even now they're working together on certain military facilities and border control. They would say border control facilities and monitoring facilities, sometimes with the Russians as well. But they're also talking about having a giant air surveillance and air defense zone over both countries. They often say two countries, one people. And this is all part of their effort to build this neo-Ottoman caliphate, which would then include the Central Asian Turkic areas. And of course, Turkey's also looking to expanding, they're doing terrorist things in Iraq and in Syria and threatening Greece and that sort of thing. But they're very close. And in fact, there was even an interview that was, or not an interview, but a discussion that was it made the media. The Erdogans and the Aliyevs were on a train going somewhere. I forgot exactly where it was, but Mrs. Erdogan asked Aliyev, "Well, do you have Armenian persons?" He says, "Oh yeah, we got a bunch of them." "Oh, that's good. Yeah, you keep them, and then you can use them for blackmailing, purposes." And Erdogan's gone to Shushi, which is they call it Shusha, but it's really Shushi, a city founded by the Armenians, a very important city culturally and historically. And he went there, and he and Aliyev were celebrating the aggression, celebrating the conquest and the occupation of this city. And he's been to other parts of Azerbaijan. And so he and Aliyev are very, very close politically and spiritually. And Turkey is a big ally and supporter of Azerbaijan in many ways, in terms of tangible physical ways, but also political and propaganda ways and things of that nature. They both governments maintain horrific falsifications of history and anti-Armenian lies and propaganda to their people to help get them whipped up into fervor and into doing what the dictators of those countries want them to do.
Can you steel man the Azerbaijan position as to why they should act the way they're doing? Like, what's their best argument, for what they're doing from their perspective?
Well, their argument, right? Okay, and I think their argument is a false one, but it's interesting. They're making another argument here, going way past Artsakh into all of Armenia itself, where they claim, oh, this is they're calling the historic Armenian homeland, what's left of it, in the Republic of Armenia, as Western Azerbaijan. It'd be more accurate to say that Azerbaijan, the large parts of that, are really Eastern Armenia. But anyway, that's what they say. Oh, this was originally Azerbaijan, and they make these false claims. Oh, that's like, the Armenians came from India, or the Armenians were imported by the Russians or the Iranians or something. And anybody that knows the real history of this area would say, well, that's nonsense. So that's kind of the case they make. And the other thing they do, and they become well known for this, David, is they use something known as mirror propaganda. Or as the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention calls it, DARVO, basically reversing the roles between the victim and the perpetrator. And so what they will do is and Turkey does something similar. They'll look at the actual history and what people know about what's happened in that region, and they'll accuse the Armenians of doing what was done to the Armenians by Turks and by Azerbaijanis. And of course, by the way, Azerbaijan, or Azerbaijanis, that name actually isn't even an accurate name for those people. These are the Turkic Tartars. And when they attempted to set up this country of Azerbaijan, they say that the British and the Soviets were both involved in that, helping them do this, along with Turkey. And they took this name of Azerbaijan. The government of Persia, or Iran, protested their use of that name. Even the name is a lie, and because there's a region of Iran, northwestern Iran, that's known as Azerbaijan. You see, and so the Azerbaijanis will use this falsified history and mirror propaganda and Darvo techniques to promote their cause. But they say, well, this was originally Azerbaijani. They also really promote this idea that they are an ally, they say, of Israel in terms of regarding Iran. And so they make a big deal out of that, and they say, "Oh, see, we're working with Israel and NATO and that sort of thing," and they try to really promote this idea, even though, and they try to promote this idea that they're somehow, tolerant of and friendly to the people of the Jewish faith, even though the history shows that Jewish people were persecuted after the Armenians were virtually gone from Azerbaijan. Then the Jewish people were in a bad way there, and most of them left. The vast majority of them left. There's only a few left, and the numbers are always inflated by the Azerbaijani government. So they try to present sort of this geopolitical argument, and then they'll say, well, gee, the Armenians seem to get along with the Iranians, and they seem at times they have some ties with the Russians. And then you say, well, of course they do. I mean, they got Turkey on the one side and Azerbaijan on the other, both trying to kill them. So it's good statecraft to say you better have somebody with whom you have good relations. And so they try to play a very cynical game in this regard. So their arguments are, A, the false argument that these areas were historically and initially Azerbaijani, but they weren't. The indigenous population, and there's another word I have a hard time pronouncing. I think it's autochthonous, but it has to do with where all the cultural things were, and it goes way back into antiquity. You can see that these things were indeed Armenian, so they use that argument. They then try to take the they then reverse the arguments about the genocide of the Armenians by the Turks and the Azerbaijanis, and they reverse victim and perpetrator in that regard. And then they try to play these this geopolitical angle of it, where they say, well, somehow this is helpful either to Israel or to NATO or something of that nature. And they play both sides of all these conflicts, including the one that's going on in Ukraine right now. But those are sort of their arguments, and their final argument is just. And then sometimes they'll say, well, there were some UN resolutions that made some argument to, like Artsakh being within Azerbaijan, but Artsakh had actually Nagorno-Karabakh had left that area, had left the Soviet Socialist Republic of Azerbaijan before the Soviet Union finally dissolved, and it was only supposed to be there during the time of the Soviet Union, and there were conditions put on that which they hadn't met. And so there's an argument then back and forth. Did the people of Artsakh that they had left and established independence according to Soviet law? So it's not a separatist. They keep saying, oh, they're separatists. They're separatists. Well, they're not separatists. You and I might say, even if they were, looking at the Declaration of Independence, that's their right and their duty to alter and abolish tyrannical and arbitrary government. And they're certainly within their rights to do that. But it looks like, and in fact, I think this is the case, that the people of Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh had left according to the rules of that time by that government, that the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic, which no longer exists, and the current Republic of Azerbaijan had no claim, morally, legally, philosophically, or otherwise, on the people of Artsakh.
Now, why is America taking the side of Azerbaijan here?
Well, David, that's a heck of a question. It's an excellent one. And we know that rhetorically, we'll hear things like, we Biden finally got them. Yeah, we recognize the Armenian genocide, and we feel sorry for what happened, and there's this and there's that. But then we know there are these other things involved. Azerbaijan is an oil-rich country. Ironically, the oil industry of Azerbaijan was largely developed by people in Baku who in many cases were Armenian before the Armenian population of Baku was wiped out. But they have this oil, and they also have, as I say, they're positioned next to Iran, and they're close to Turkey. And so the United States, and this I think is a key point, United States foreign policy of surrounding all these countries, this whole area, and maintaining like the deadly sanctions on Syria and imposing sanctions on other countries and pushing against China and Russia together. It leads maybe some people in the deep state in Washington, D.C. to try to find areas where they can leverage against the Russians and or the Chinese. And in the case of the Azerbaijanis, and I think even during the Cold War, in fact, I remember one of Clancy's books talked about that. I think the beginning of one of Clancy's books was it Red Dawn, maybe, if I have the right book in mind. But he has an example, some Azerbaijani guy or team doing some sabotage or something at the beginning of that book. And so there are probably people in the West that think, well, we can get them to work on our goal of hurting Russia or something of that nature, and then of hurting Iran, and the heck with all the pain they cause for millions and millions of people. But I think that's the people that can make these decisions, which don't help Americans and then cause a lot of problems for other people, but are in Washington, D.C. and have the levers of power. This I think, is probably a big reason why they do that. They have some financial reasons. They have geopolitical reasons. They think they're going to be the masters of the universe and that sort of thing. And so I think that's what drives that. And ironically, what they end up doing is creating, in some cases, groupings of nations that join together against that, which was totally unintended. But we see that with BRICS and maybe with, if Turkey, Iran, Russia, and China, and some of these other countries all got together, you might have some unusual alliances, but they're being forced into that. But I think there are probably people in Washington who see Azerbaijan as a place where they can benefit themselves by working with them. They say, well, there's only 2.5 or 3 million Armenians. Who really cares about them? And if this puts some more pressure on Iran or somehow helps our effort to destabilize Russia and have that country blow up, either literally or figuratively, they're maybe some of them are for that. But the good news is we are getting more and more people that are starting to awaken to this, and they're saying, hey, this is wrong, and it's not good for Americans, and it certainly is a very immoral policy.
Yeah, it's disturbing how that democracy facade is always so thin and so cheaply discarded when you look at reality of what they're supposed to be, using our tax dollars that they take to supposedly spread democracy and freedom, and it's just such a sham. Where can people continue to follow this story? What's some reliable places or maybe you have something you could share with us that you have?
Well, that's a good question. There are, I would say that some people that have done some great work on this. The Armenian National Committee of America has some excellent work, and people over there like Alex Galitsky does very, very good work on this. There's a group called Stop Armenophobia. They do excellent work. Maro Kochinian and her people. Ara Petrosian is another fellow. There are people reporting right from the ground in Artsakh. So there's the Artsakh and Gorno-Karabakh ombudsman. These are all people you can find on Twitter that provide some very good work in this. Uzay Bulut, her name is spelled Uzay Blut, who is actually from Turkey originally. She's written some good things, some very good things on this. She's really on top of what's happening over there. The American Conservative Magazine has had a couple of writers who have written about this and done quite well. As I mentioned, Ambassador Brownback is someone else that has done that. The International Court of Justice, which, by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. The International Court of Justice issued a ruling saying that Azerbaijan must provide security, must not interfere with unimpeded travel between Armenia and Artsakh of this corridor, which they call the Lachin corridor. And they reiterated that. And the Azerbaijanis refused to comply with that. So you can read about what the International Court of Justice had to say about this. The Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention is another very good source that has done that. And there's just been a former chief prosecutor, and I believe his last name is Campos, and he has done wonderful work, and you can find his things on Twitter as well, where he's talked about this, and he says how bad this has been. Even Jake Tapper, by the way, just came out with something which is interesting. Jake Tapper of CNN. Now, I would just adjust one thing here. He says, the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh are facing starvation within Azerbaijan. They're not within Azerbaijan. Artsakh is not Azerbaijan. Artsakh is independent of Azerbaijan. It's not even part of Armenia. It's an independent area. If
Does
they
America
decide,
recognize it as that? Does America recognize it as independent, or they say it's Azerbaijan?
It's officially disputed territory. Now, some states in the United States have recognized Artsakh as independent, including our own state of Michigan here. And I think it's a double-digit number of states that have done that. And now, something the Azerbaijanis will say, well, gee, even Armenia didn't recognize Artsakh that way. Why was that? And I think the reason was a political reason. They were concerned that if they did that, some people would, because the Azerbaijanis had done a better job of capturing the narrative, and then were at that time, and they were concerned about there being sanctions, which would be deadly, as we see what's happened to Syria, right, and in other countries, So they didn't. But again, that's a political decision. And so I would say the case for recognition of Artsakh as an independent republic is that's what the people said. And we know in our American Declaration of Independence about the right and the duty to overthrow tyrannical and arbitrary government. It goes back up at least to Algernon Sidney, who gave up his head for this, right, when he expressed it, and then John Locke picked it up, and so on and so forth. But also, according to the Soviet laws, they had done that. And Maro, as I say, Maro Kochinian has done great work on this. Another source of great information is a Twitter site called Origins Discovery. Origins Discovery on Twitter. And our good man, Len Wick, who's originally Australian, lives in Armenia. He and his lovely wife, Armenia, have a resort that they built, a beautiful place. People should know about and go visit it. They can never get there. It has many attributes to it. but he's done some extensive work on this. And so I would say see what he has written about this also. And I'm going to leave some people out, so if they watch this, I'm sorry, it's a slip of the tongue and not of the heart. But also a woman named Lily Ray, Lily, and I think underscore and then Ray. She's got good work. So there's, as it turns out, Twitter has people that can provide lots of good information, and I've left a bunch of them out here that I'll think of as soon as we hang up. But these are people that provide some really good things. Oh, Lindsay Snell. Don't want to forget Lindsay Snell, Lindsey Snell. She's on Twitter, and she provides excellent information on this also. And one of the themes that goes with this is not only are these people heroic to bring this up, not only are they showing that they're not buying the propaganda and the nonsense from Ilham Aliyev and his dictatorship in Baku, but frequently, if they're really successful, they come under all sorts of attacks from this Azerbaijani troll factory. And they have a very active, very hostile, very dishonest, and very aggressive and persistent social media presence. They also have even diplomatic people that have done things like they had this one fellow, I think he was the ambassador to the European Union, when the European Union was sending observers to Armenia to see what was going on. He had a Twitter post where he showed an automatic weapon or some sort of a sniper rifle. And he said, oh, to the European Union observers and diplomats, oh, look at this. And our people know how to use it. And they said, well, you're threatening these people. And you're the ambassador? And this is typical of what they've got. So the people I mentioned are definitely good ones to follow. And there are others. And if you follow the people I mentioned, then you'll find out about the other ones as well. And the other aspect of this is that you'll see this just unbelievable level of rotten discourse from the Azerbaijani state and Azerbaijani state media and alleged diplomatic people who are not diplomatic. It's incredible what they've done, even to the point with their Armenia-phobia and with their hatred and their propaganda. They emulate the Nazis in the way they do this 24/7 to the school children over there. And they even put out a postage stamp a couple of years ago where it showed the idea was it was an Azerbaijani soldier, but like he was eradicating insects from an area. And that's right out of the Nazi playbook. And the way they've treated the Armenian captives, including Anush Apetyan, who was a woman that they had, she was defending Armenia, not even in Artsakh, she was in Armenia. They'd captured her. She was a sniper. She was defending her home country. What they did to her it is so far beyond the pale in terms of everything terrible they could do to a woman. They videotaped the whole thing. They're laughing about it. They're celebrating it. It was mass rape, and her body was mutilated. And they sprayed their slogans on her, and then they painted them, and then they were sharing this around like it was a celebrational thing. These are the depths of demonic depravity to which this regime and its enablers sink. But the other people I mentioned are people that you could read that could tell you about this, and there are others as well. And for those I forgot to mention, I apologize. But I really appreciate your bringing this up, David. You're to be commended for this, and this I think fits into a lot of the themes that you've talked about in the past, and about the dangers of the state and the Messianic state, and how people can go so far away from the message of Christ and all the good things of life and all the virtues. If you were looking for a country that sort of summed this up, it's not the only one, but this is maybe one of the worst or one of the most striking examples. It would be Azerbaijan, and then this shameful U.S. policy, which we're trying to end. And again, we had our resolution at our congressional district, and I urge others to do what they can to awaken the American government to stop supporting this and to figure out a way to say we have to end this humanitarian blockade of these courageous people in Artsakh.
Is there a reliable organization that you can get food to people who are going to be starving in this blockade that America's supporting?
Great point. And actually, yes, there are some. The Armenian Missionary Association of America is a good one to work with, as for an example. Turns out there's a convoy of trucks. Once again, a great question by you, David. They sent a convoy of trucks from Armenia and said, okay, here, we got all the supplies right here. Just let them through, which is what was agreed to in that ceasefire tripartite agreement, which is what the International Court of Justice said had to happen, which is what any decent human being would say would have to happen. These trucks are stuck. There are more supplies coming in from France, and the French are sending some more trucks, and so the pressure is mounting. But these trucks are sitting there, at this choke point, which is illegal and immoral. And of course, there's always the danger that some of these things will start spoiling. There was never a problem with them having enough goods to get by or to survive, to eat, to drink, and to have the medicines and all that until Azerbaijan launched this latest in a long line of terror initiatives against the people of Artsakh. So I mentioned the Armenian Missionary Association of America is a good one to work with. There are others as well, but really the main thing is just get the way opened as it's supposed to be, morally and legally. Get the way open so that people can get their supplies and have freedom to live with dignity in the land of their forefathers and the land of their birth, and to end this terrible aggression and attempted imposition of rule on people who do not consent by the dictator Ilham Aliyev, who is a man that's guilty of many war crimes, as are his Azerbaijani accomplices.
Very good. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave. You do wonderful work. And for those that are just watching this, because I sent this to you, you should listen to David and follow him on Twitter. He does great work with many interesting guests. So God bless you. And thank you very much, David.
That's a good point. I mean, you've been very good at keeping track of this story for folks. And your Twitter is at Dennis Marburg 1. And it's MARBURGE 1 at Dennis Marburg 1, the number 1, for updates on this issue too. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome, David. Thank you very much. All the best, sir.